After I failed the bar exam the first time, the future opened in front of me like a bottomless pit. I had what some psychologists call a numinous experience. When I failed the second time, the consequential emotions of failure took on wild, almost demonic forms and plunged me into real trepidation. When everything was ripped out from underneath me, I identified with what all the externalities were telling me. I was a failure. This was the logical consequence of seeking external validation to the degree I had sought it. Hopelessness settled in and my confidence withered away. Unsurprisingly, the only active role I took in the aftermath of my failure was self pity. I resorted to different and varying degrees of reclusiveness, isolation, and self loathing, and I allowed these emotions to live rent free in my soul for the next several years. It is an all too real consequence for some who fail the bar exam to find that the despair and hopelessness is so great it brings them to suicide. I have dedicated this book to one of them. Although I did not go that far, when I signed my name on the dotted line with the United States Marine Corps, I did consider how I would very likely be deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan. My emotional state being what it was, I was completely indifferent to the possibility of being killed in combat. And the reason for my emotional detritus was nothing new. These feelings had begun their slow stranglehold on me approximately 3 years earlier when I first began law school. That is an excerpt from Chris Pavlak's From Lawyer to Warrior: Failing the Bar, Becoming a Marine, and Finding Meaning, a book I had the pleasure of helping out with as a developmental editor and early reader. Chris served as a ground intelligence officer leading Marine rifle and scout sniper platoons. He has been a planner for Marine Corps service level exercises and served as an advisor to the Afghan security forces. He has also worked as a faculty member at the National Intelligence University and as a civilian consultant on policies and ethics surrounding AI and other emerging technologies on and off the battlefield. Chris lives in Alexandria, Virginia. Welcome to Notes from a Ghost, a podcast about stories and the people who tell them. My name is Charlie, and I'm a ghostwriter. I love a good story. I hope you enjoy this one. Chris, thanks so much for being here.
Good morning, Charlie. It's glad to be here. Glad to be here, truly.
I'm so glad we finally made this happen. I know we've been talking about it.
Totally.
So I want to start with just a little bit of like shameless praise and before even we get into the book or your career.
Yeah.
So something I'm going to talk about more probably on later standalone episodes is last week I finished this project I've been talking about here for a while, and that is sea kayaking around Ireland.
I know, man. Congratulations. That's amazing. That's incredible. I saw some updates. You and your mom were sending updates like this guy is doing it. It was wild.
It was so cool. I know you were watching the tracker and everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I loved it when I think at one point you messaged me and you were like, wow, you went a long way today. It was on one of my longer days. And
yeah.
That stuff.
It's
I mean,
impressive. It's an
thank you.
impressive accomplishment, man. That's impressive. It is. I mean, when we were hiking a few years ago, like is that the Bantry Peninsula? What was that? I mean,
yeah, Sheep's Head Peninsula, where
Sheep's Head
Bantry
Peninsula.
is.
That's right. Yeah, and you said that you one of your earmarks for doing something that was meaningful and a significant accomplishment is if you can see it from space. You can say like if you walked around something or hiked something that you can see from space, that's worthwhile. And so now you can certainly see Ireland from space.
Oh,
And you can say,
absolutely. And even that hike, which I was going to get into, that's like if people are picturing down at the southwest corner of Ireland, there's these little fingers that stick out into the Atlantic. And Chris and another friend of mine kind of simultaneously had both heard about this hike that happens to be in my backyard. And the three of us got together and did it. And it was really hard. It was really, really hard.
Yeah,
and it was a funny team because it was like our friend Richard, who has kind of an ultralight hiking skill set. I'm kind of general outdoors, but more of a water person. And then you're actually have backpacked professionally
Yeah.
for
Yeah, yeah.
Uncle Sam.
But
Eh,
Rich is a Brit, and the Brits, they have an uncanny ability to hike like the best of them. They are the best at humping, as we call it. They just can go forever, regardless of the foot pain, regardless of the back pain, the shoulder pain. I don't know what it is about Brits are notoriously known for just grinding it out um a hardball road hike, or or through the to the hills.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's pretty unbelievable. And I know we had a Marine on here, a U.S. Marine, talking about rucking earlier,
Hmm.
John Daly, but who has a whole Substack about rucking.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
no, that's it's a whole other. And I think what do they call it? Yomping in their
Yomping,
military.
perhaps. Yeah.
In but yeah, it is, and walking in pretty nasty conditions. I mean, the ground is almost always wet. And when we did that hike, it had been dry for a while, so we ended up carrying way too much water
Yeah.
because there wasn't the streams weren't flowing, and it,
Sure.
it it was challenging. But there's one, and here's what I'm getting at. There's one story I love to tell people, which is that you burned vacation days to to be there and do that, and
Hmm.
and and um and I think it's safe to say a lot of your outdoor experience was in the military, and you were, from what I understood, you were prepared to like sort of bivvy, like basically sleep out in the open,
Yeah.
possibly
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
side of the road, and you were like pleasantly surprised that we had tents.
Yeah, I mean, that's tents are a luxury in the Marine Corps. That's truly what it is. That's the way to say it. A tent is a luxury because in all your training, as an officer candidate school, which actually, in fact, doesn't have a lot of field exercises, if you will. There's there's a short one that was like an overnight thing, and even forget. It's towards the end, but I forget what it was about. And your squad level exercises are just for the day. And then the basic school, which I can get into later, that's definitely the immersion, your first dosage of, okay, you've joined an infantry centric organization, and we're going to give you the full dosage of infantry kinds of things. And that's when you're outside regularly, probably every week. Um, Again, no tents. And then even in the wintertime in Quantico, no tents. And then in infantry officer course, that's certainly you're outside basically every day for weeks on end. And again, no tents at all. So yeah, when I was with you guys, I thought, oh yeah, tents. This is comfy, you know.
And it's never like it's almost like a endorsement of the mental toughness that you'd have learned from the Marine Corps, that you were up for that. Like your idea of a vacation could be just sleeping
Yeah,
outdoors and
yeah. I mean, I don't know if it makes me any more tough. It just makes it. I just manage expectations. It just helps manage expectations. I mean, I'd love a 5-star. It would have been great to stop at these punctuated places around the peninsula at these, if there miraculously appeared some Ritz Carlton. Oh, that's where we're staying tonight, right? But that's not the case. It's like, okay, I'm happy with the ground. A tent is a luxury.
um yeah, and I guess it does help to set the bar quite low.
Extremely low. Yeah.
Um
Extremely low.
there was something I saw online where, because everybody wants to learn all these hacks and
Mhm.
secrets from the military, but the secret to like sleeping is just to do things that make you so exhausted that you can sleep
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, we can get into that too, but yeah, you're just so tired that like whether it's a lumpy sleeping bag or like a really hard ground secondary, you're just glad to lay down and get maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours of sleep. Yeah.
So there was something you told me about on that hike that I, on my kayaking trip, kept coming back to like again and again.
Mhm.
And it is no exaggeration to say that this piece of advice, this tool, like I might not have gotten around Ireland without it. And that is the idea of like going internal and noticing, keeping an
Mhm.
eye out for when I'm in that state. Could you tell us a little bit about what that
Sure.
is?
Yeah, so it's kind of a colloquialism we use in the Marine Corps, kind of like a quick you as you're talking to your troops, you're talking to your Marines, like, or you're talking to yourself, like, just beware of going internal. And what that means is, let me say what it doesn't mean first. It doesn't mean like depression, right? You're not depressed. However, in real combat environments, it could end up in depression, but it's basically you've entered kind of a spectrum of internalization where you can no longer really focus on the external tasks that you're supposed to be doing because you're cold, you're tired, you're hungry, your feet hurt, all these different physical things, the elements, they're all kind of impacting you almost like simultaneously, or you've just kind of met this maybe this breaking point internally to your soul. You're like, all right, I've had it. And in any other context, I would go inside, take a shower, get something to eat, etc., and be done with it. But you can't do that. And so I think going internal begins at the level of self pity. Really, it's like you're feeling sorry for yourself. Um, but that's on a spectrum, and you got to be aware, like, okay, I'm feeling uncomfortable. Um, I'm feeling I'm hungry or whatever the thing is, and do I have tasks, external tasks I can focus my mind on to make sure I don't go too deeply internal. We all kind of go into like, okay, it's cold out, put a jacket on, or I'm hungry, grab some chow, whatever. But if you linger there, if you linger in that state of mind without specific tasks, uh, you can really keep burrowing into that internalization. And you become eventually detached from your unit. You know, your fire team might be like, okay, Chris is checked out, or he's just not responsive. He's not carrying the load, whatever the thing is. He's not doing what he's supposed to be doing, or he's not doing it well. And then just scale it out to like, okay, the squad, the platoon, etc. Um, and that's what we mean by going internal. It can happen in a training environment. In fact, training environments are designed to kind of bring those things to the surface. Uh, Combat, I want to characterize things and qualify things for your listeners. I have not been in hard kicking indoors combat in Afghanistan. I don't want to. It is Memorial Day, and we got to think about the people who have done that for real and who have died doing that. So I have not been kicking indoors in Iraq or Afghanistan in that real kinetic, really difficult fighting. But in any kind of combat environment, it can creep in, and sometimes it's slowly, and sometimes it's very acutely. Like, okay, because it's raining and it's cold, everyone's kind of internal. So I'll stop there. But I think, yeah, internalization, it's a real thing, and the training that the Marine Corps gives, and I'm sure other branches of service as well. The training the Marine Corps creates and manufactures is to really accentuate those pieces of people's their spirit, their discipline, to see, can they really push through these uncomfortable circumstances and stay on task and then ultimately accomplish the mission.
Mm. And yeah, and I mean, I might as well on my end clarify that, in no way am I saying that my kayaking trip was like a combat,
Yeah,
deployment or whatever.
yeah.
But the fact is that that element was in play of a real danger of
Hmm.
descending into self-pity
Yeah.
because of the elements, because of fatigue. Um, and
Right.
it's interesting because it seems to me that that same framework could be useful in a situation as benign as like social anxiety or something,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or a work project
Totally. I
run
think so. I
over
mean,
time.
if you're overwhelmed, if you don't really know exactly what you're doing, what your boss asks you to do, sure, and you don't really want to look embarrassed or ask too many follow-up questions or any follow-up questions, uh, yeah, you might take your work back to your desk or wherever you are and try to make sense of it. And um, there's the looming timeline or deadline that might be out there, and if you don't really know what you're doing, you can easily just go internal. And I will say this, that uh, like I said, it's the beginning of a spectrum of internalization that begins usually in feeling sorry for oneself, and I can't really say how far away it is, but it can end in what the Marine Corps has called like a psychological casualty. And Nate Fick, he was gracious enough to blurb my book. In his book, One Bullet Away, he mentions that was a training technique where, before a certain training environment, one of the staff members took him aside and said, okay, for the next evolution, you are going to be a psychological casualty. And that means you're not going to respond to the tasks your squad leader gives you. You're not going to be engaged. You're not going to be enthusiastic. You're not really going to be caring about the mission. And so I think internalization, yeah, it begins with feeling sorry for yourself. But if it's not monitored or checked, or your leaders aren't checking on in on your Marines, it can metastasize into something that you're just completely checked out, and now you're a liability to the team.
In it's funny, in sea kayaking we use the term, and in the lifeboat too, casualty, slightly differently, in the sense that like a victim in an incident, I think that's the
Hmm.
distinction, is incapable of assisting with their own rescue, whereas a
Right, right.
casualty is conscious and checked in enough to be able to follow instructions, or do things to help you rescue them in a
Hmm.
incident. Um, it's interesting how it seems to me that the antidote for that isn't being like macho and ignoring your emotions or whatever. It's actually about tuning in, and weird little things seem to make a difference. I mean, it could be as simple as like, do
Yeah,
you need a some chocolate, or like a cup
yeah.
of coffee, or
Yeah, totally. And that's why we always say, there's this, you don't really realize it when you first join the Marine Corps. There's a whole vernacular that you're listening to, you're learning about, and you're kind of joining the conversation. Uh, and we always say chow is continuous, and meaning you should always have some kind of on the go food on your person at all times, whether it's a small little, pack of crackers, or one thing that we loved during IOC was chocolate covered espresso beans, because they're going to keep you awake, and they're a nice little thing. But whatever the thing is, like we say, chow is continuous, because you're not going to, in a real life event, the enemy is not going to let you sit down and, okay, go eat and we'll come back to the fighting. And there isn't necessarily going to be hot food. There isn't going to be um, a regular like source of food except for your MRE. So you have to be cognizant of those things. And same thing with hydration. You shouldn't have to be told to drink water throughout the evolution. You drink water because you need to be able to function. You need to have lucidity and clarity of mind. You need to be able to go a hike, do the thing. Um, and so there's the implied tasks of being a leader is you got to take care of yourself first, and you got to monitor when you are getting uncomfortable to the point where, uh, what we also call comfort based decisions, right? You make a comfort based
Ugh.
decision. So now, sometimes you have to do that. You might have done that because out of safety, you were alone off the coast of Ireland, and it's like, okay, I'm really tired, I'm cold, I'm wet, and maybe I just don't have it in me today, or for like the next. I was supposed to go 12 miles, I can only go 8, and that's a safety based decision. But also, it's like, well, all right, what started as a comfort based decision could turn into a safety based decision, right? But you have to understand, and that's that nuance, because you have to look and ask, am I making a comfort based decision right now? Meaning, do I just not want to go outside today, or do I just not want to go into the woods, or whatever the uncomfortable thing is? Do I just not want to go lay down in the fighting hole that is a, a better tactical advantage, but it's all messy and dirty and wet? Like, and so you have to look and see, are you making comfort-based decisions more rapidly or more regularly, or are you deferring to the easy way out? And that could be the first sign of going internal.
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, I mean, I think you see that sort of everywhere. I mean, I could see that in the gym, right? Of like,
Hmm.
is it, are you taking a rest a day because that's the smart thing for your longevity and your tendons and your joints? Or
Yeah.
are you just being lazy, and like you
Yeah.
didn't really earn the rest, not to put it in like meathead terms,
Yeah.
but
No, yeah. I mean, I think a guy like, I mean, I can't speak for him, obviously, but I think a guy like David Goggins, like, he's never making comfort-based decisions, right? He's always just 1000% just gonna go beyond all discomfort, right? And and that's what we talk about when we, and maybe you felt it too. When you do something that's hard and challenging, and you push yourself beyond your perceived limits, that's where growth begins, and that's where you learn about yourself and you learn about others. Uh, and and that it's a real thing, and that's, I'm sure you might have felt that. I mean, what did you feel when you were? Was there 1 or 2 days, or maybe several days, in what was it, 40? Did you do it in 40
yeah, it
days
was
around?
40 days, yeah, to
So
finish the trip.
some of those days must have been like, all right, I'm having a hard time with this, but I still have my goal. And did you ever surpass your goal for the day, surprisingly, or did you say, "All right, I'm just feeling miserable, but I'm gonna make it through"?
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting when you talk about this as like a spectrum because there were
Mhm.
all of the above, right? I mean, there were days where I didn't want to get out of bed that ended up being some of my best days, or the
Yeah.
day started kind of sulky and like this isn't great, and I kind of want to just stop somewhere and get dry. And then that feeling sort of went away and I almost forgot about it. And by the end of the day, I was so happy
Mhm.
that I pushed on.
Yeah.
Um, and then there were others where, yeah, I was like, okay, this isn't I'm not gonna get any warmer as long as I'm on the water, and eventually that's gonna be a safety issue. And
Right.
so this I need to it's gonna be plan B minus. Like we're not even gonna think about the original distance I had in
Yeah.
mind. And then, and then there were times where I just, the one place where that going internal, the cognizance of that was like really important. There was a crossing between these two islands, Inish Boffin and Inish Turk, and this was a
Mhm.
day that like totally turned around. But when I was doing that crossing, it's about a little over 2 hours. I was dealing with a headwind, like a light headwind, but it was
Mhm.
still a headwind, and I was already kind of wet and cold. And I had this just like, why me? Like this isn't fun. I kind of want
Yeah.
to go home. I have best case scenario another month of this, and like,
Yeah.
and it was sort of like, I mean, it really
Yeah.
did say, I was like, I want, like, it sounds so childish, but that's what I was thinking was,
Mhm.
and then when I got to Inish Turk, and there's this uh elderly woman who lives on the slipway there, Mary, who's been helping Round Ireland kayakers since like as long as this trip has been a thing. And it's this tiny little island with not very many people on it. And she like made me a cup of tea, and
Did she know you
I
were coming?
no, no, not at all. She just
Oh.
saw me pull up, and her
Oh,
house
wow.
overlooks the
Okay.
harbor, and
Oh,
um,
perfect. Yeah.
it was one of those things where it like thank God I didn't quit when I wanted to,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
because it was I wouldn't, besides missing out on everything else and regretting it, I would have missed even just that simple experience.
Yeah.
And but it I don't know if I hadn't recognized that, and I could have made it a lot worse by feeling
Mhm.
ashamed of how I was feeling, of
Yeah.
like, oh, what does this say about me? Am I too like
Right.
weak to do this trip or whatever?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's interesting. I just thought of this now because there's a difference here where when you go internal as a Marine in a fire team or a squad or a platoon, you're going to have someone who's going to keep you accountable. Even if it's all the way up to the platoon commander, someone's gonna see you disengaging. Someone's gonna see you not caring, or worse. I mean, I don't want to say it corrects itself right away, but there's usually attention given to that Marine, and they say, "Hey, go get some chow, go hydrate, maybe even if you have the chance, tactically go lay down, take a nap, or whatever the thing is you got to do." But you didn't have that luxury as a kayaker, as a solo. You're solo, so I'd say you have to monitor even more vigilantly the aspects of going internal. And there's probably a sweet spot where you're like, okay, this is what I did this for. I wanted the challenge, and I wanted to push myself, and I wanted to have that um, that experience of meeting my limits and probably going beyond that. But if you go too far, you could put yourself in real danger, especially with the maybe the unpredictable weather around Ireland. So you're not going to have another Marine or 2 Marines or 3 Marines watching you to make sure you're back on track.
oh yeah, it would have been it would have been great to have like a platoon helping me out or
Right,
something.
right.
No, you're right, and I think that what you end up doing is you just make different decisions and have different margins for safety.
Mhm.
If you and I were doing this trip, when I say cold, like I was just uncomfortable. I wasn't hypothermic, but I wasn't about
Yeah,
to let myself, because being hypothermic is almost like being drunk, where once
yeah,
it's a problem, you're not actually going to be cognizant of the problem, and
right.
that's very scary. Um, but if I was with somebody, like whatever, they can kind of get me, like they can help me get warm when we land. I'm
Mhm.
not saying you'd ever just shrug off hypothermia, but the margins are a little different than when you're just solely responsible for your safety. And there was an element too of like there were people I could check in with when I was about to make a decision, like a big decision about a crossing or
Yeah,
something. Um,
right.
because
Right.
you don't want to get also like kind of adrenaline adapted to where you're just like starting to make reckless decisions because you're just in expedition mode.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
but
Yeah, that's
but
interesting.
one thing I wanted to kind of loop back to that's in the excerpt I read, you know, because that I mean, talk about going internal. I mean, your
Mm.
story really, as far as this book's concerned, started with the defeat of failing the bar exam multiple
Yeah.
times.
Right.
Right.
And it seemed to me the thing that like I remember when we were talking about this book and through the editing process, you kind of ticked all the boxes you were supposed to tick, and you sort of like were on track to a life that is supposed to be sort of the not only the secure, safe option, but something that your family can kind of understand and be proud of, and
Mhm.
it right. Um, and then all of that just blew up in your face and didn't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, yeah, it didn't work.
And
Yeah.
I guess the part of that that really grabbed me, and I had never even thought of this, if you talked about losing friends, right? You're a Marine. People assume that comes with the job, but
Mhm.
the fact is, like, you lost people to the bar exam and to the stress.
Yeah. Yeah, sort of. I mean, I gotta remember that, you know, and this is where, thank God for some perspective of and for what we call, it's a tactical term, standoff, when you have, physical or temporal distance from something, right? And in this case, it's temporal distance from the event. And um, it was certainly the only thing I thought of at that time was this how monumental this failure was. But now being in the Marine Corps, and again, it's Memorial Day, and you realize now there's ultimate sacrifices people are making in extreme circumstances and things like that. But it at the moment, yeah, it was difficult, and it was my world was kind of just pulled out from underneath me, and there was, not everyone. I have a small handful of people I'm still in touch with from law school, not many, and part of that was on me, like my own shame and my own humiliation and not wanting to talk to anybody in the aftermath of failing because um it's we can all, I think, relate to working your ass off for something for several number one, for 3 years in law school. It's a grind, and then you have this 3.5 month, basically, let's just call it like, you're done with classes around mid-May. You might take a week or two, and then it's like, all right, or you graduate in mid-May, and then for us it's like, okay, after Memorial Day, get back on the horse because you got about 100 days or 90 days of studying, not even 90 days. And when you dedicate all this time to something, and it doesn't happen, it doesn't come through, right? And that's the real, I think, the real gut check is you begin to wonder, like, can I do anything that I put my mind to? Because that's the mantra, right? You can do anything you put your mind to, and you're like, well, not necessarily. And then you start trying to wrap your head around, well, why can't I do this? And um, I suppose I should probably go back and look at the forensics if I wanted to. I mean, it's been now almost, what is it? You have it 2006 and seven. I mean, uh, why didn't I get as many questions right as I needed to? What was going on in my mind as I took the exam? But more importantly, it was my friends moved on. They all passed. All the friends I knew, and I was the only one who I knew in school who failed. I think there was one or two other classmates, but no one really knew who they were. I didn't know who they were, and um, they all move on and they begin their career. And I'm stuck in this strange kind of mezzanine level. I'm no longer a student. I'm not a lawyer, but this huge hurdle is preventing me from beginning that next chapter. So and I think I had a lot of agency in that too. I just wanted to be by myself. And this is that beginning of going internal, right? I just didn't want to
Mm.
be around anybody. I wanted to be by myself, sulking probably and feeling sorry for myself. Like I said, that's how it began. Begins with feeling sorry for oneself, and then um, you don't want to be around anybody. And was I a bit more temperamental back then? Probably, right? I didn't really know how to take things in stride. While it is it's a big setback. It definitely like knocked me off my feet. Whereas maybe today, if I had a similar setback, I hope I wouldn't react as, um, I wouldn't become as reclusive as I did, or I wouldn't think of like the sky as falling as much as I did. But at the time, I just put $150,000 on the table for this law degree, and I worked my ass off. And it's like, what in the world? I can't make this work. What's going on?
And I think too that it's really important that it's it's a law degree. It's kind of one of those things where you're sort of almost promised that by society,
Yeah.
where it's like if
Yeah.
you do the work, if you can get into law school, if you can pass the LSAT, et cetera, it's not as if you like went to start a band and or some or like make it in Hollywood or whatever, where
Right.
like really that's not ever
Yeah.
sold to us as like a sure thing.
No. Right.
Um,
Right, and they always, it's like this taboo thing to even before you take the bar exam, everyone's always talking about the percentage of passers or the percentage of those people who pass for that, particular jurisdiction. So in my case, it was Minnesota, and everyone's like, "Well, what's the passage rate?" And it was in the high 80s, I think, across Minnesota. Um, for the first time takers, I think it was like 86% of first time takers pass the bar exam. So like the odds are in your favor in a way. Like you're like, okay, I'll be in that 86%, sure, right? And no one asks themselves, well, what if you're in the other 14%, right? Or what happens? And no one wants to think about it. No one wants to talk about it because it opens a whole chasm, I think, of like, I don't know what I'm gonna do because I need to get a job. I need to move on. Um, and I that's partly why I wrote my book. I mean, it was therapeutic at first. It was helping me, and I didn't even set out to write it. It was just I began journaling about these things, trying to make sense of them. And over time, I realized maybe there's something here that it's not only helpful for myself, but maybe be helpful for others. Because when I graduated and I failed, there wasn't a book, there wasn't a podcast that I could kind of turn to say, and I think I've told you this before, Charlie. Like I didn't need someone to say, "Well, just pick yourself up by your bootstraps." Again, I didn't need that. I needed someone who had been in this and had gone to the other side of failure, and can at least say, "Hey, you're still going to be okay. Like this is not the end of the world." Because it feels like that, and there's something also too, like maybe being trained as a lawyer when you're so when you care so much about the minutia, the details, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. You're like, you're so wrapped up in this moment that you can't see it getting better or improving. But yeah, it was challenging.
That's such a good point and a really good and that was something I thought your book does really well is that vulnerability aspect because it even if someone has gone through something and overcome it, if you're where they were and you don't necessarily want to hear the cute life hack version of how to
No,
get out of
no, and
there.
it would have, yeah. That's like the last thing I wanted to hear was oh well, just get back on the horse or things like that. And yeah, I had to see if I could do it. I mean, I, I ended up failing 4 times, right? So it's like I got back on the horse 3 more times, and I never passed. So it's like again, I people will try to relate. They just try to say, well, just keep going, man. Just keep at it. And I get it. There's only so much they can say because they're not in it with you. But for someone who's been in it, yeah, I don't. You don't really need like another pat on the back of like, go get 'em, tiger. You need
Mm,
okay, life. There's a new normal here, and it's not about like maybe the exam is the wrong metric. It's how does one deal with failing something that he or she has put so much time into, right? It could be anything. And that's where I think I mentioned in my book too. Like after I failed the second time, I was like, do I even know how to add anymore? Can I even like do 2 + 2 = 4? Like, what are the other things like what we might think is table stakes things I'm supposed to be able to do as an adult? Uh, or anything. Like, how do I even know I can do those things that I thought I could do? Because that's where you really start, I think, getting going really mentally internal and doubting yourself. That's where self doubt can creep in because it began to creep into other things in my life. Like I don't know if I can do anything.
mm. No, I can God, I can relate to that. I mean, even putting a trip on hold due to an injury, it was a case
Yeah.
of it was like having this there's a climber who makes this analogy of like a rat gnawing at you, like,
Sure.
um,
Right.
and it just
Yeah.
was, and it was unfinished business. Um,
Yeah.
and people are gonna have to pick up the book because it isn't like a straight line between you failed the bar and then joined the Marine Corps, and there's some pretty like amusing like interludes there.
Yeah.
And there's a now I forget because I know you were in between drafts. Did you end up including the Hollywood sort of? People are gonna have to read it to get that part, but
Yeah, that was
it
after the Marine Corps, and
oh,
that
okay, oh,
was
right.
yeah, that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
after
yeah.
the Marine Corps. Mhm.
Because that was
Yeah.
a whole other level of what now, what next,
Oh,
but,
totally. Right. Yeah.
so the one thing that, I would say about your book, is this is not a book about why people should join the Marine Corps. It's not a recruiting pamphlet. It's what I think, and it's much deeper than that. It's really about finding your calling after what you thought was your calling doesn't happen, and
Right.
for you
Yeah.
that was the Marine Corps.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And at the same time, it seems like, we'll like get into this because I think you and I are both people who are really interested in history and
Mhm.
tradition and kind of old stuff. But I
Yeah.
think like once upon a time, it would have been a totally normal, expected thing that you would serve your country, and that's kind of less common. This
Mhm.
this wasn't in your head as an option uh, when you were
What wasn't?
younger. Sorry, joining the Marine Corps. Like it wasn't
Oh,
something like your parents had served or whatever.
well, my dad had been in the Air Force Reserves his whole life, and he did the normal 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year, and he had been mobilized briefly, activated to, we're from Minnesota, and so his reserve unit was called down to North Carolina because the North Carolina unit went forward into this is the first Persian Gulf War in 1993.
Okay.
So he had been activated briefly for like 90 days or 4 months, and went down there to support the unit in North Carolina, or kind of like replace the one that had gone forward to Kuwait. And my grandfather, his father, so my dad's dad was in World War II in the Navy. My dad's brother, was also in the Navy, and actually my uncle, that's what he made his career. He was an active duty, sailor his whole life. So I did have an appreciation for it. I did have a sense of, like, okay, there's something there. It was never forced on me. It was never expected. But I remember when I was little, maybe not even little, I mean, I that same uncle was stationed at Camp Lejeune, and I have a little story in my book about the first time I had like got exposure to the Marine Corps, because he was at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. He was stationed there as a corpsman or a medic, and uh, he went and bought uh, uh, an 8-point cover. So we go to the PX. He buys me an 8-point cover, which is your hat in the Marine Corps, right? And we were leaving Camp Lejeune to continue on to go to Disney World. So it was my dad and like my siblings and my mom, and um, we see this little convoy, three or four vehicles of Humvees, right, driving down the road, and the Marine in the Humvee saluted me because I had my cover on, and so it was one of those things I never forgot it, and those that perfect recruitment, right, of a the perfect kind of recruiting behavior is like salute the little kid who's wearing a Marine cover, and that never left my maybe it was always in the back of my mind. And then as I grew older and I was in high school, a friend of mine was he got an appointment both at West Point and the Air Force Academy, and that kind of reignited a little bit of an appreciation. But I tell you, and maybe I don't know if your dad says the same thing, but like once you have the notion of becoming a Marine in your head, like there's no turning back. Like no other branch of service is going to answer that yearning for you except Marine. So, um, yeah, it was definitely kind of a circuitous path. I won't get into everything. I mean, it's in the book, but it was kind of a circuitous path, how I revisited the Marine Corps to become a staff judge advocate, right? So I'm in law school. I think, all right, I had a plan, and the plan was to become an assistant U.S. attorney, a federal prosecutor. And I knew that the military is a great baptism by fire when it comes to going into the
Mhm.
courtroom, more than you'd ever usually more than you'd ever get at a like a city or county prosecutor's office, right? Um, and so I thought, okay, that's going to be my play. I'm going to join the Marine Corps as a lawyer, and obviously that didn't happen. But along the way, when I was kind of told of some of the red tape of from the officer selection officer, he told me, he's like, look, we don't have a demand for men and women in your current status. And I was my second year of law school, and I approach him. I'm like, I want to be a lawyer for the Marine Corps. He's like, well, unfortunately, our billets are all being absorbed by men and women who have already gone to OCS. They pulled that trigger a year ago, and so we have no demand for people in your boat right now. And that was my first exposure to, okay, I think I want to do this. And then failing the bar was like the nail in the coffin. Like, okay, well, I've had enough exposure with them. I've gotten to know the branch of service a little bit more. I'm definitely excited about this, and I want to do this I want to do this as a man, more than just being a lawyer. Like, I need to do this as personally more than professionally. So, long answer, sorry,
Oh, no.
that was yeah, there was just no real direct straight line to the Marine Corps. And I tell people that when I didn't join till I was 28. All said and done, I was 28 years old. I mean, I was as old as many captains by the time I was a second lieutenant.
And, what you're saying, and I forget if you shared this with me or if this was just something I read, because for those of us who've worked in marketing or advertising, um, the Marine Corps kind of stands alone among services in that the marketing strategy of the Marine Corps has always appealed to emotion and has
Hmm.
acknowledged that people join Marines because they want to like become a Marine, and it's an emotional decision.
Yeah.
That was true in my dad's generation. I'm sure it's true today. Whereas a lot of the other branches will sort of appeal to like we're going to pay for college, or like I remember
Hmm.
there was this ad for the army when I was in high school. It was like it was kind of like remind me to never join the army. And it was like it was this guy's like dad in a garage talking about like son, like what was it, like the other day you like shook my hand and you looked me in the eye and you've never done that before. And it was like he was
Okay.
so
Yeah.
proud of like the man
Yeah.
he'd become in the army.
Sure.
And it was like, is that an ad for the parents? We don't know, but like Marine Corps is like, what is it like? Dragons and swords and
Dragons and swords, and the premise is the premise is you're not good enough. The premise is you can't become one of us, and it's the greatest recruiting tool of all time. Uh, it's like you can't, maybe you can make it, but we doubt it. So it's like, and you tell that to a cocky 18-year-old kid, and like now you have them lined up, right? You're gonna have them lined up to see if they can do this because it's like maybe you can do it, but you probably can't kind of attitude, right? Uh, and so it's a great little, you know, recruiting tool. Yeah.
yeah, that's no, it's funny. And that, I mean, it seems to be universal. I mean, I think it was a case of
Yeah. Yeah. And, for me, it was, I always, for whatever reason, I mean, maybe not because it has such great marketing. I just always considered it to be, like the best, notwithstanding special operations and the Navy SEALs and the Green Berets, all credit to those guys. But as far as like the conventional military forces, I always considered, and I think a lot of people consider the Marine Corps to be the best, highest standards, the most rigorous standards, the toughest physical fitness, and yeah, and again, remember, like I'm coming off of a devastating failure, and so I almost had to. I'd already been thinking about it, yes, but I had to, like, in a sense, like get get the balance of the cosmos back in balance, right? Like the scales of justice, scales of my own life had become back in balance, where like I had just succumbed to this whole bad experience. I needed something to kind of neutralize the badness and counteract it, if that makes sense. So I needed something just as lofty, just as challenging, just as um, enthusiastic and good that I think only the Marine Corps could answer.
You must have crossed a line at some point where you just ended up wanting that more than you had wanted
Yeah,
the other the old
yeah,
dream, the one that didn't work out. Like,
totally. And that there was I mentioned that in my chapter on officer candidate school. So officer candidate school for the listeners, it's in Quantico, Virginia. It's 10 weeks. Um, Men and women both are going through this, and it is it's an evaluation process. It's unlike recruit training, which is, once you're a recruit, like, you're going to graduate unless something devastatingly bad happens to you. Like, you might get recycled from class to class to class, but you're going to become a Marine at the end of this unless you harm
recruit,
yourself.
you mean like boot camp? Is that what
Boot
that
camp,
is?
yeah. So boot camp, Marine Corps recruit station. They're called recruiting stations, right? It sounds weird because you go to a recruiter to want to join, and then once you are, like, at boot camp, it's for example, Marine Corps recruiting station in San Diego is where all the West Coast Marines go. West of the Mississippi, east of the Mississippi, those enlisted Marines go to uh, Paris Island in I think it's South Carolina. But all officers, wherever they're from in the United States, go to Quantico, men and women both. And it's 10 weeks, and it's an evaluation, and you might not be selected. They're trying to weed out, and they're trying to determine whether you have the capacity. Do you have the potential to lead Marines, and do you have the potential to be in charge and things like that? And so it's a different kind of evaluation. Um, the men and women I know that were prior enlisted that went to boot camp, and then somewhere along the way they became officers. They said it's a noticeable difference, um, between the two. But anyway, to answer your question, yeah, I'm terrible. I'm just terrible at rifle drill manual, and I won't get in.
What is drill? Is that just like
Yeah, drill is
looking good?
you see you see it a lot. If you like the proverbial like the quintessential Marine Corps boot camp movie is Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket, right? Like the first half of that with R. Lee Ermey does an amazing performance of a passionate and violent drill instructor, you know. Uh, but it's a bit of a caricature, but it's not far from the truth, to be honest. It's not far. And I bet your dad had much more of a close kind of a experience, excuse me, than I did. Excuse me for a second. And drill is okay. So you have to. It's basically the meta reason that you go through drill is to learn how to have immediate obedience to orders. And you have to begin to operate as a cohesive unit. So you take all these civilians from all different walks of life, you put a uniform on them, and they need to be able to work together towards a common goal. Drill is, from the time of Napoleon and even maybe before that, about how to, like, it had a tactical purpose because that's how armies fought. So they'd fight in these formations, and you'd have someone giving commands, and they had to be able to immediately move to a different kind of formation of like 45 or 50 people, and it came to how they're going to orient themselves on the terrain, how they're going to, like, remain in sync, etc. And while we don't fight that way anymore, in the 21st century, um, the military, especially the Marine Corps, has said, well, just even though we don't fight that way, that's a great way to um, get people to, in one moment, kind of shed their civilian identity, work towards a common goal, and immediately obey the commands of the drill instructor. Right. So it's called drill manual. And so you're manipulating weapons a certain way. You have to, like, and there's a cadence, and so you're marching in step with your other platoon mates, and it's all about, again, it looks sloppy in the beginning, like everyone, all of us look really sloppy, and it doesn't look good. But by the end of your, especially in the recruit training, like enlisted men and women, they get a heavy dosage of this, and so they are really sharp when they come out of boot camp. Officers, we get a healthy dosage, but there's more to go on. There's more going on at officer candidate school, so um, we have to do other things as well. But it was about halfway through OCS we had a weapons inspection, right? Again, it's just, and there's precision. There's a certain way you do this. There's a very precise way you do this, and you're on the spot in front of your drill instructor, and it's again, everything at OCS is an evaluation, right? They don't really. It ultimately does it. Yes, it matters for OCS whether you can do the thing, sure. As a Marine officer, does it matter? Maybe not. It's just like you have to perform in the moment and do the thing. And there's a proper way to manipulate the weapon, and there's proper things you have to say. And I did just abysmally. There's this, you have to, I'm going to get it wrong now, but there's a part where you have to, there's no rounds of ammunition in your weapon, right? Your weapon is, there's no magazine in the magazine well, but you have to manipulate it such where you can show the drill instructor that the trigger is functional, and so you have to manipulate it, and you have to in all the different movements that are happening in, like, in seconds. Part of it has to turn the safety switch off, so you have to now it has to be on fire. Okay, so when you pull the trigger, you hear a click that shows the instructor that, okay, it's functional and you know how to do the thing. I forgot to do the I forgot to turn it on to fire or pull take the safety off. And that just unraveled, the whole thing unraveled, and it was bad. It was terrible. And I began getting sloppy. I was all, it wasn't good at all. And this is halfway through. And by this time, you should be getting things by this time. You should be, you know, um, not drawing attention to yourself, but I was. And the drill instructor came down hard on me, and he's like, "Do you even want to? You're not going to respond, right? You're just like he's just shouting at you." Um, but he's like, "Damn, do you even want to be here?" Kind of thing. And that it rattled me. It rattled me, and I thought, well, I want this more now than I want anything else in my life. Like I'd forgotten about this being like a plan B. This is no longer like a plan B. Like this was my thing, and I was like, I was so eager to do this, and I wanted to do this really badly. But yeah, so it was one of those moments where, like, this might not happen because they're evaluating me. They could always just tell me to go home. And so there was this crystallization of, like, yeah, I want this as a man. Like, I don't care about becoming a lawyer, right? I don't care. Like, I want this uh, as a man. So I want to become a Marine officer.
It's interesting. You had said something to me about your experience of that period of growth where there was a bit of a lag in kind
Hmm.
of how you saw yourself maybe, or
Yeah.
you were sort of doing the thing before you could really see
Right.
that you were. You can phrase it better than I can, but I thought that was interesting, and again, something that applies way beyond your specific experience of.
Yeah. I remember it was after graduation from officer candidate school. Um, so, like, everything's done. We're all done. And I'm gonna fly home from DC to Minnesota for a couple weeks, and my parents are there, and my dad's driving the car up to the airport. Um, and so I think it's like the day after graduation, and he said, "How does it feel?" And I really didn't know what to say, and I remember telling him this. I said I thought it was going to feel more transformational in the moment. I thought I was going to feel like this, you know, just like this demigod walking around, like I'm a Marine and all these things, and um, I was certainly proud of myself, but it was different, and I think I didn't realize how much I had changed, um, even though I said it wasn't as transformational. And what I realized was over time, in the next several months, because I mean, all I'd done right now by this point, I just graduated officer candidate school, 10 weeks. It was challenging, wasn't impossible, right? It was challenging. Um, but I was just like, I'm brand new. So I have a lot of learning to occur, and I got a lot of other training to go through yet. Um, but I thought for whatever reason it was supposed to feel more transformational. later on, I realized with the kinds of things I was prepared to do or the kinds of attitudes I think I was able to maintain and work through certain problems or training or even teamwork, the kinds of things that I'd been able to kind of shed from law school that weren't serving me. I was able to see, oh, you know what? Yeah, becoming a Marine, it was transformational. I just didn't see it in the small, acute way. Over time, though, I saw it had really kind of shaped me into a different person.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I've heard people make that analogy of the way a ship turns really slowly,
Oh yeah.
that, there's
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
delay. Um, so when you finally got to work, I wanna talk a little bit about the writing and stuff.
Mhm.
When you started writing about this experience and that transformation, and I think for people who do really like to read military memoirs, I mean, your book doesn't disappoint. There's a lot in there about even just the procedural stuff of how a person goes from civilian to Marine officer,
Yeah.
um and then obviously the very interesting community of like intelligence and snipers and all the rest.
Mhm.
But when you went to write about that, was there, oh, and I just remembered there's another thing I want to get into too, but
Okay.
that
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
had front row seat
Yeah.
to, and that has come up on this podcast before. We'll get to that in a second.
Okay.
Um,
Cool.
was there anything you learned about the Marine Corps by writing about it and reading about it as part of this project that you might not have known or appreciated if it was just your job and not the subject of a book?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think it it forced me to really explore the different the personal reasons for wanting to join. I go through, as you know, I kind of go through like this is what happened at this kind of training evolution, and this is what the reason is for this thing, and I kind of have the okay, there's the pragmatic things that are that I write about, but there was the meta things that were really kind of resonating with me, and and I think the first time I realized this is in 2000 and I think it was 2014, maybe 13, 14. So my book wasn't even on the horizon yet. It was just I had written I had written a short piece just for myself even. It was really just for myself about how meaningful graduating from infantry officer course was in June of 2000 and June of 2008. So even like 5 years later, it was something I was able to put pen to paper on, and it was this compelling story of how meaningful and how now talk about transformative, that episode of training was for me and how meaningful and impactful it was for me. So, that's when I had to begin to explore the meta reasons for wanting to join and the things that the Marine Corps offered, as a man and as a life's vocation. That's when I really had to kind of put pen to paper. Or I began to put pen to paper. Maybe unknowingly, unwittingly, I was trying to get those things onto paper about. Yeah, this isn't just learning how to become a leader and the different kinds of leadership skills and leadership exercises you go through. There was a meta experience going on that I was trying to capture, and I wanted to get it on paper before I kind of lost it or I lost the memory of it. And that's really what it was. I think I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, totally. Well, it sounds like what you really discovered through that was what all of this meant to you.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, it was. I really had to think about it, and I was realizing that so many things in my life uh, since I joined the Marine Corps had changed for the better. I mean, it put me on a trajectory uh, that I could never even have even guessed or even like made a fictional novel about. Right? I could have never written that because it was such an eye opening experience, and the people I met and the experiences I had, and it was a good. I had to admit this is as much as I don't like some of the things that the Marine Corps requires of us, like all the rules that might be a bit burdensome you can't I couldn't ignore how good that was for my life and how stabilizing it was. Um, you go to law school and sometimes you come out of law school kind of cocky, like, oh, I know the law and I can, I'm a whiz with words, and I can do all these things, and that's all fair. But there was a sense of like, yeah, that's fair, but this has been a better challenge for you. This has been a better channeling of the things you got to do and try to, really kind of find your way in life. And in a sense, maybe what I'm trying to say is law school allowed me to be kind of the cerebral academic without really much friction, right? Or a lot of challenges to see if I could really get through it. It's challenging, it's in its own right, but it's an academic environment. The Marine Corps is like real world. You're dealing with other people, you're dealing with real problems, and you're training for combat, which is the most real thing. So you got to be able to do the things that it's going to ask of you, and that was a more pragmatic um, a more pragmatic, I think, school, if that makes sense. It's hard to explain it, but even though it was more pragmatic, the irony is that it made me think about meta things, more cerebral things. That's kind of the irony there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I I guess it probably only stoked your interest in history and thing to
Yeah,
be a part of it in a
yeah,
sense.
totally, totally. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've been doing all the talking here. Like, do you
No.
it- were there things that what prompted you to want to like kayak, or what prompted you to want to give yourself the challenges of kayaking to the point where you have, because there's plenty of enthusiasts out there that kayak on the weekends, or but you decided to do something much more challenging and much more solo, and that's dangerous.
Yeah, it's funny you asked that because I can really relate to the difference between how I might answer that question in the moment. Like if you were to stop me while I'm out there, especially on a
Hmm.
really hard day, I'd probably just sort of mutter something about kind of this crux move that's coming up and bearings and
Yeah.
distances, and like I'd be so caught up in the doing of it, it would be really hard to have a serious answer other than kind of one stroke after another, or getting to lunch, or
Hmm.
you getting. That's part of what I love about being an expedition. Same thing, like food is continuous, where it's like if you're starting, at 4 a.m. because of the tide, are you
Yeah.
really going to wait till lunchtime to have lunch, or is lunch going to split up your day that started
Yeah.
way before breakfast?
Right.
Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
the immediacy of all that, the way it kind of turns down the volume on everything else, I couldn't imagine
Yeah. Hmm.
when I'm in that wanting anything else or wanting to be anything else. The kind of
Yeah.
disturbing realization I had on this trip is, and I said this to Dominique at one point, like if I did this for long enough, I think I'd forget what my family looks like.
Really.
Like I would just sort of, yeah, the
Mm.
expedition would be the only reality there is. It would you'd
Okay.
cross over in that kind of maybe now we're into apocalypse now territory.
Maybe.
um,
Maybe. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but uh
Maybe.
but but I guess
What do you is that sorry, is that
no,
like
no.
akin to like the proverbial like runner's high, or is it more than that?
I think a little bit. I mean, it's one that kind of like you're in just for like, and I've heard it called like expedition mode or the expedition bubble. I think it's
Okay.
because you're just used to having simple but very important tasks that are like repetitive and
Mhm.
have to get done kind of no matter what sort of physical state you're in. And there's a sort of, I hate to use the word suffering because like
Mhm.
at the end of the day, this is
Yeah.
a basically a vacation. But it,
Yeah.
but it's and it's no one's forcing
Yeah.
me to be there. No, no,
No,
it's
right. Yeah.
but at the same time, like it's not easy. And I think that coming ashore and thinking about it, and I've only had about a week to think about it. It still hasn't
Mhm.
sunk in, but
Yeah, I
um,
bet. Yeah.
you do start to think about tradition and history, and like to me, there's no more flags to be planted or highest summits to be climbed, and so those externals kind of aren't there. So if
Mhm.
you want to have an adventure in this day and age, you really end up asking kind of what's in it for you personally, and not in a
Yeah.
selfish way, but in like a what am I going to experience? What about this am I going to bring home with me?
Mhm.
Um
Yeah.
and um and then like by slowing things down, traveling in a hand powered vessel, you can have a real adventure and set out on
Right.
the water without like a really certain idea of how things are going to go. Um,
Yeah.
and I guess that's
Yeah.
kind of what appeals to me about it, and that's very different from the day to day of like emails and
Right.
it's easy to then sort of just identify with that very strongly to be like I'm more this than I am. I mean, probably like the way a lot of like runners are just crazy about running to the point where
Hmm.
you'd know that about them like before they've even opened their mouth.
Yeah. Right.
Um,
Right.
you
But,
know,
and the thing is too, like, you might say that what you were doing were, they were simple tasks day in and day out, but they were crucial tasks.
Mhm.
Like, because if you don't, and I don't know enough about kayaking, so I don't wanna sound like an idiot here, but I mean, if you're not, checking your compass, if you're, like, off vector, uh, failure to do a critical task because you're internal, like we started talking about, because you've gone internal or because you're lazy or all the different things that may have forced you to ignore those critical tasks or not do them well, suddenly you could be in immediate danger, right? I mean, you could have real bad consequences if you don't do those crucial tasks throughout that day's, itinerary.
Oh, totally. Yeah, and I think you add the element of water, especially salt water, which kind of
Hmm.
destroys everything and
Yeah.
like yeah, simple but crucial is a great way to put it. And as far as taking you out of like day to day life, I'd say for listeners at home, like when's the last time that you needed to figure out access to water for
Hmm.
not just like a drink of water now, but like for tomorrow as well,
Yeah.
or make sure that you had hot
Right.
water so you could heat up a meal um
Yeah.
or
So tell me
like
about that. Did you how many, like, what we might call, like, you know, well, just planning. We just call it it's, called planning. No, it's not that it's not like it's some profound idea, just called planning. But I mean, you really couldn't do like a leader's recon. You can't go forward to go look at something first and then come back to where you are so you know the route you're going to take, et cetera, because it's on the water. Did you know the stops you were gonna make and the waypoints that you had? Was this something that you had roughly planned out or, like, very specifically planned out, or was it truly, like, choose your own adventure from week to week?
yeah, so it was a little of both, but the fact is well, the good thing is, I mean, Ireland, it's you're in kind of a rural to semi-urban environment most of the
Yeah,
time. There's
yeah,
not a lot of like true the ocean, I mean, is a wilderness in the sense. I think for wilderness medicine, they define it as like being more than 90 minutes from advanced medical care.
okay.
So, a lot of places in Ireland, you put your big toe in the water, you're in the wilderness,
Yeah,
technically.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
that said, I didn't, it's not like I was using my phone to figure out where I am very much because like you're already halfway lost if you have to do that. But,
Yeah,
ahead of time, and I'm sure I'm bringing back
yeah,
memories of like
yeah.
land nav and,
Land nav, yeah, yeah, yeah.
but, so you can, it's amazing what you can do ahead of time from home on
Mhm,
Google Maps and just figure out, okay, there's a pier here. It's facing
mhm,
south. That means that if there's a kind of a north wind and swell, I'm gonna be fine to get going again in the morning, in and out of there.
mhm.
There's a little shop up the road. There's a pub, so I could, you know, doing this trip kind of in the shoulder season in April meant that some of the places where I thought I could get like a meal in a restaurant weren't open.
Ah, okay.
Little stuff like that,
But
but
those
at
little
this,
like, sorry to interrupt, but those
yeah,
little
no,
things can make you go internal. Like, if it's like, granted, you made it back to shore, you're cool, but, yeah, if you're, like, looking for a nice hot meal and you don't get it, you're like, "Oh, man," Anyway,
oh,
continue.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, totally, if especially if you've been kinda looking forward to it all day. There were a couple places where I made stupid assumptions, and it was like, well, I thought because that's a pretty big harbor that they would have a
Mhm.
water tap right there, but they didn't, and that
Right,
meant having to go find water.
right.
Little things like that. There were a couple places where the paddling was very technical around a headland, and
Okay,
some of those you could actually land and recce it the way you would a river. Like if you're, I think whitewater kayakers do this a lot, where they could walk down to the feature that they're about to paddle
sure.
through. Um, but no, I mean you're exactly right. I mean planning really is sort of all of it. What is the six P's of like proper prior planning prevents
Prevents
poor
poor
performance,
performance,
I
something
think.
like that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
something like that. And so like yeah, there was a lot of that. And then it was a mix of, okay, well, if I am going to go a little farther today, what does that mean about my options for where I'm going to
Mhm.
spend the night? Or, um,
How hard is it to, because talk about land nav, right? And I don't know if it's if there's land nav, there's water nav. Um, you had to know how to, read a compass, right? And create like just choose like find the vector that you're on or the vector you want to be on. In the meantime, you're looking at the shoreline and you have to do terrain association, right? Were you looking at a map? Because it's too cumbersome, I'm sure, in the seat of the kayak to number one, there's this what I don't know what it's called. Is it a sleeve that comes all the way up to your waist? What's that thing called?
yeah, spray skirt. So you're
The
basically like
spray
sealed
skirt.
into the kayak.
So you can't be manipulating different kinds of gear in the moment, right?
No, and well, if your hands are off the paddle, you're
Bad
not making
news.
progress.
Okay,
And
yeah,
yeah, so you're less stable. So you want to do as little of that as possible. But you can actually, like, I had a map case on my lap, probably pretty similar to something you would have carried,
yeah,
with nicely folded.
sure.
Um, I think you were the one who showed me that the map doesn't have to, or the chart on the sea doesn't have to be folded along the lines that it came with. You can just make it.
Oh yeah, just just fold it how you need to. Yeah, user friendly. Create. You just find some user friendliness, and yeah, there are all
Yeah.
kinds of things that lieutenants would like little hacks that we had. Like, hey, just do this or use these kinds of markers and stuff. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, most of it is, I guess I think, terrain association on the sea is called pilotage, and that's just
Oh,
like, okay,
okay.
that hill over there is that thing. And it's the reason they mark churches on nautical charts a lot of the times. It's not for religious reasons, it's because there's a steeple you
It's a
can see.
landmark. Yeah,
Yeah, and because
yeah,
it's amazing how just gray and featureless a coastline can be from a couple miles out. So it
yeah.
helps to be like, okay, well, that I know is the town, and that means
Mhm.
that this other thing is probably where the pier is, even though I can't see it yet.
Okay. Were there
Um,
ever any moments or days where you didn't know where you were for a little while?
Sort of like momentarily, there were a couple places where I aimed for kind of the wrong thing, and that
Mhm.
can be very, talk about going internal. I mean, because you
Yeah.
judge yourself for doing that, and then it's like, am I now in some kind of danger because I'm not where I thought I was? Um, Luckily, I got very good weather, very good visibility. I was never defaulting to the GPS, which is always your get out of jail free card.
Okay. Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, there were a couple moments where it's like I thought a saddle on an island was actually the gap between the island and the next island, and that was
Mm.
annoying because it meant that I had to go farther, but also, like, to take this weird dog leg that I hadn't planned on. And
Okay. And is this
um,
based on your own eyesight? Were you binoculars or anything?
no, yeah, just eyesight. And I
Okay.
think, again, it takes a really long time to get used to looking miles ahead of you all day
Yeah.
long.
Wow.
And so, like, that part is weird, and it can be disheartening when it's like, oh yeah, that gray lump that looks like it's on the other side of the world is actually where I need to go before I can have lunch.
Yeah. Yeah, what that's gotta be something you have to try to wrap your head around, I suppose. I mean, um, yeah, I think when you look at the distance you have to go before you can that's why here's the thing, that's why you're doing it, right? You're out there so you can be kayaking, but nonetheless, it can be difficult and you're like, "Wow, I have a long way to go, before I get another break or before I can eat whatever my next meal." Yeah, was there any part of it where you thought, um, you were gonna go further than you initially planned, and you're gonna see if you're gonna, like, push your luck, so to speak? Like, push the luck of the weather, push the luck of your endurance, push the luck of your, hydration, or did you just basically stick to a pre-regimented amount of length each day?
No, and I ended up with some tendonitis due to overdoing it one day, and
Okay.
that limited me for the whole rest of the trip. I was paddling injured for about half the trip.
Oh, really? Okay.
Um, but no, there were a lot of times where I think I really just had to listen to my body and realize, like, okay, um this is not a military operation. Like, I do not
Yeah.
need to push this. I don't have to. And in fact, maybe if I stay here, the biggest thing actually, to answer that question, is like there are times where you stop short, knowing you're facing like a weather delay. And if I have a
Okay.
choice
Yeah.
between being in a fun surf town where there's people and shops I can go to and nice restaurants,
Yeah.
I'd rather, if I know I'm about to be stuck for 4 days, which is what ended up happening, I'll go there instead of squeezing just a little more mileage out of my last day and then being on a stone beach with,
Right.
like, plastic
Nothing,
garbage that
nothing to
washed up.
do.
Nothing to do, just, like,
Yeah.
looking at birds
Yeah.
and eating
Yeah.
camping meals
Right.
for 4 days.
And I
So
suppose
that's,
doing that would also help preserve your meals later on, like, help your food go further because you stopped at
totally.
pubs and things?
Yeah, that was a huge factor on this trip, and being
Yeah.
able to be smart about getting into shops when I could, and so
Right.
I made, um, my first 2 weeks of food last almost the entire trip.
Yeah. So
Um,
I wanna ask you something too because, you know, and I don't know if your listeners know about your first attempt, was it 2 years ago or last
2
year?
years ago, yeah.
2 years ago. Um, so we're talking about going internal. Where along the trip of that first trip did you realize, okay, it's not just uncomfortable. I'm not just feeling sorry for myself. I'm now at a place of risk that I don't want to deal with anymore. It's too risky and I'm uncomfortable. And then was that basically your barometer for this trip? Like, okay, as long as I don't get into that kind of risk or that kind of harm, I can keep pushing forward. So yeah, can you tell me about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are kind of 2 things going on there. One of them is that kind of objective risk that you talk about, and I'm sure this is a thing in the military and planning. It's definitely a thing in other adventure sports where, like, there's a difference between stuff you can mitigate, stuff you can plan for, stuff you can kind of, like, manage versus
Mhm.
things that are just there's no amount of courage or toughness or whatever
Yeah.
that could have, if a bomb lands on you or something. Like, I don't know what
Right.
the equivalent would be. There is no way you could have, like, been more courageous
Sure.
and
Yeah.
or stayed up a little later or whatever. And luckily there isn't a ton of that beyond, like, the cold and stuff on the water.
Mhm.
But having a serious injury that was going to require major surgery, it became clear that there was no, like, this was an objective danger that was way outside of the, for listeners at home, basically I had a hernia from lifting the boats on the first day that then got kind of worse and worse and worse until eventually, like, I couldn't sit up in the boat. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
and there's also, in first aid, we talk about big sick versus little sick.
Uh-huh.
Because the first aid training you would do for, like, outdoor pursuits is not all it is about just stabilizing someone to get them to more advanced care. You're not I'm not a doctor. I'm not even an EMT or first responder. I'm like, I have a pretty basic first aid training,
Yeah.
and that was a case of big sick. If you need surgery, that's whereas little sick
Sure.
is like muscle soreness,
Yeah.
little cuts, things like that, where you carry stuff in the first aid kit to treat yourself. The tendonitis on my second trip, I'd say was borderline, but it was something where I kept going on, like, a lighter load and
Okay.
took Tylenol, and it was okay. I made it.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah, yeah.
the other one, yeah, it was a case of, like, nope, this is a medical issue, and it's become a medical emergency if I keep going.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
in
Go ahead.
Well, and I was just gonna say, in some ways that makes the decision making a little bit easier because it
Mhm.
isn't a case of, like, when I quit that time, I felt really good about it. It wasn't a case of,
Mhm.
like, as soon as I get warm, I'm gonna regret this.
Fair.
Right.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And that's this dilemma that I mentioned during in my chapter at Officer Candidate School because you are being evaluated and it's not enjoyable, right? There's nothing about Officer Candidate School that's enjoyable. And you want every day you're in it, you're just glad that you made it to that day. But there is eventually what happens for some, not all. Some people who are there are like Division 1 athletes, and they're amazing runners. They're amazing, whatever the sport is, and they want to become a Marine, and they're fantastic athletes. Because Officer Can School is just it's real heavy on the physical fitness. There's the drill, there's leadership exercises, there's leadership evaluations, there's some academics, and then there's a lot of physical fitness. And maybe in isolation, or if you were to take just the physical fitness by itself, not terrible. It's challenging, but when you stack on sleepless nights, when you stack on other things, you stack on the stress of like performing, uh, what can creep in are injuries and,
Mhm.
fatigue. And you have to do these things. Like I mentioned this thing that happens every class, every platoon goes through it. It's called the crud, where all these different people coming from all parts of America, um, they bring their own germs, okay, and it's very close quarters. It's not the most sanitary environment because you're outside, you're sweating, you're in some, that's why they have to keep things extremely clean in a Marine barracks, because you're just all these different people living among each other. There's a spread of germs. But eventually what happens is people get fatigued. You might have pneumonia, you might have other things that creep in, blisters, sprained ankles, sprained knees. And kind of to your point about when is enough, or when do you tap out? That's the hard calculus that officer candidates have to think about, because like, well, the Marine Corps draws people who are very motivated and driven people who don't say no. Like that's the kind of person you want in the Marine Corps, someone that isn't going to just tap out right away. But if you're not careful, the injury, and so same thing with you and your hernia, or even like the tendonitis this year, if you were to go push yourself too far, you might have an irreparable injury and now you're disqualified, right? Or in your
Mhm.
case, you might have an injury that now you're stranded out in the water, and you're going to have a really hard time making it back to shore, or worse, right? So there's that internal calculus you got to do. And like, yeah, we all might feel sorry for ourselves at first, but you have to say, okay, is this just discomfort, or is this too much risk?
Yeah, I mean, couldn't have said it better myself. And even it's funny you mentioned the crud. I love that. I mean, there
Yeah.
was that issue too. I'd have all sorts of sores and itches and things that just from being damp all the time. That's
Hmm.
super nasty. I won't go into too much
Yeah.
detail, but
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, just knowing that none of that's going to get better.
Right.
Like, and then at the same time, there's a certain amount of just accepting that, and then at the same time being very vigilant for something that's maybe more serious where you do need to see a doctor or you do need to rethink
Yeah.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
And
What was your
especially for a sport, at the end of the
what
day,
were
it's not
your
worth it.
sleep patterns? Did you dedicate, you made sure you got at least 6 hours a night, 8 hours a night, or was it just like, hey, if I get enough sleep, I get enough sleep?
All over the place. Yeah.
Okay.
I had some guided meditation stuff
Yeah.
for times when I knew I wasn't going to. And this was recommended to me by some folks who rode the Mid Pacific.
Mhm.
Um, Also fundraising. They've been on the podcast, and I'm going to have them back because they made it for those who listened to
Wow.
that
Okay.
episode.
Yeah.
Um, and That was pretty amazing. Like there was one night in particular where I had about an hour of sleep. I just
Oof.
was restless because of this really early start that I had coming up, and I had to do a rock portage in the dark alone, which was
How
absolutely horrible.
far?
It was probably only like 30 meters, 30 yards. It
Oh,
took me
okay.
well over an hour.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
there were like boulders and stuff, and it was in the dark, and I had a headlamp, and I ended up
Yeah.
damaging the boat a little bit.
Okay.
And It was one of those things, and I just but listening to this guided meditation that was meant for like a what's it called, non-sleep deep rest, I think is the technical term, or yoga
Okay.
nidra. That
Yeah.
helped a lot. So
Yeah.
trying to find rest when you can't necessarily get sleep was a big part of
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
And then Yeah, but the sleep was kind of weird. It was never perfect. I think in the summer you'd have even less because there's so, as you experienced when you were in Ireland, there's so little darkness.
Yeah.
And if you're on a
Yeah.
trip, it makes sense to use all the daylight you can.
Mhm.
Um,
That's true. Yeah. I brought it up because that is the first thing that the first thing that they meaning the training staff at Officer Candidate School, and then likewise into TBS and Infantry Officer course, um, they can really mess with your sleep. They
mm,
sleep deprivation is a thing. It's on purpose. It's all purposeful to take away your sleep, and give you things that you have to do by the end of the day or well into the evening. And now all you want to do is rest, but you have these tasks to do before tomorrow. And yeah, it really does affect your performance. It affects your mental clarity. It affects your temperament. Um, that's one thing I've noticed, and this is, it's an interesting experiment to conduct on humans, I guess you could say, is you can have people who are wonderful performers when all pistons are firing, when they have enough sleep, when they're warm, they're dry, and they're in certain environments. But you begin to take those things away or begin to degrade those things and then see who performs. That's a real interesting experiment because Marines who may do very well in what's called the garrison life, back in the barracks, uh, their stuff's always squared away. They're the first one to formation. They're motivated. They're enthusiastic. Um, they may not perform well when it's cold and they're wet and they're hungry and they've only had 2 hours of sleep in the last day and a half. Like now we'll see who performs. Um, and that goes for officers as well. I mean, you have to be able to do the things, in uncomfortable situations. Now, here's the hard part. You train this way and it's never fun. No one likes to go without sleep, but it can impact things. It can impact your performance to the point where you are unaware of risks because you're sleep
Mm.
deprived. And there's a one thing that they talk about or they teach you, and it's not just in the military, but I think going a whole day without sleep, going a 24-hour cycle without any sleep is just like being like legally drunk.
I
Uh
remember reading that. Yeah.
yeah, so
Crazy.
now I've not done the science on it. I don't know if that's actually like true, like if that's what's physiologically going on, but it does feel like it, and you're not as clear mentally, and you're not as lucid, and you can get whatever happens if you if you get angry when you're sleep deprived, if you get cranky when you're sleep deprived, all these things come forward, and now you bring these things to the training environment, and again you're being evaluated, and so the how are people going to react in these circumstances? Because ultimately, the enemy does not care whether you got sleep or not, right? They're not going to let you get your full 8 hours and then we can commence battle, you know? So it just, lack of sleep, I noticed that was one thing. That was a new variable in my adult life that it's, um, it's an interesting variable that can sway things in many different directions that you're unprepared for, is because everyone on your team is sleep deprived. So it's just an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, and you go back to the solo adventuring versus a team, and that's
Yeah,
one thing. And it's really funny because I remember on our hike, Richard's tent blew down in the middle of the night.
that's
He had a
right. Yeah,
like a ultralight tent, and we got some high winds.
yeah,
You and I were in the tent that was like staked out. It was like a
yeah.
bomb
Yeah.
shelter.
It was windy for us too, but ours was safe. Yeah, it was
We were
windy, but it
fine.
was safe. Yeah,
And then Richard woke up in this like pile of broken tent that he just sort of wrapped around himself for shelter all night long. And
yeah.
he he was kind of like, "Yeah, guys, my tent blew down." Like he wasn't feeling sorry for himself. He wasn't
No,
angry. He
no.
just kind of got on with it. And
Nor did he
um
come wake us up when it happened. Like
no, and oh my
he
god,
just,
like I
yeah,
kind of wish he had.
yeah, right.
But no, but that's the kind of person you want to do a trip with, I find. And
Yeah,
one thing I've said to people, or I've been told this because I've not led too many group trips, but I've done some, and you want to like maybe try to even if like I don't know, maybe to go do a cheap flight somewhere where you have to get up at 3 in the morning and be at the airport. You're going to learn a lot about what that person
yeah,
is like if they've only ever been your like fair weather friend and during
yeah,
normal hours.
right.
And because it isn't really like the lesson from like any of this outdoor stuff is not who's the toughest, who's the strongest, whatever. It's like,
No.
can you remain cheerful when things are kind of not going your way?
Yeah, that's the antithesis of going internal. Like, can you still be external enough to know your surroundings, know your teammates are relying on you, and those things are kind of contagious. Like panic is contagious. That's why they teach you don't panic over the radio. because the recipient is going to hear it in the officer's voice and know something's wrong, and now that's going to reverberate across the staff or across the Marines, and you want to remain as calm as you can given the circumstances. And then likewise though, when everyone's and had a great friend, he's a good friend of mine, uh, who we were in the same fire team during infantry officer course, which was now taking all the training of officer candidate school and the basic school, and then elevating it to a lot of friction. And I mean, to it's one of probably the thing I'm the most proud of is graduating from infantry officer course, because it's the premier infantry school in the Marine Corps. And luckily, just luckily that I had this guy as a fire teammate, and he told the best stories at the best times, because we could all kind of be sulking, we could all be kind of like, understand it's miserable, it's cold, it's wet, we're all hungry, sure, like we all understand it's bad, because it is like, but if you have the presence of mind to elevate yourself from that and say, okay, but I can still cheer people up, or I can still help everyone get through this, or can make it a little less miserable because I'm in a good mood. Like, that goes so far, right? And I wish I were better at it. I still, despite all the training I've been through, I just wish I were better at being able to take yourself out of the misery and say, all right, it's only temporary and we're all in this together, etc. But um, this is where weather and hunger and fatigue really do a number on different people. It's bizarre, but it certainly impacts everybody.
And I think too, people who try to be rigid and like not be or not admit that they're
Mhm.
affected, like that's how
Yeah.
that's like worse in a
Yeah.
way.
Right. Yeah, it can be. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, so I know you have a hard stop coming up, and I wanted to there. I'll kind of want to circle back to the writing because I had a couple little
Sure.
questions there. But talk about stuff that's out of your control. There's a process that I got to know through being on the sidelines of your book, and I've
Mhm.
since seen it with other authors, and we've talked about it on this podcast before. But that is
Yeah.
the joys and the exercise in patience that is the review process for
Oh,
the
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Department of Defense. Can you explain what that's all about?
Yeah, so, I mean, like anything, whenever the DoD has its rules about, what its members might be sharing with the public and why. um, Mostly because they're worried about, there's a lowercase p political game here. You don't want to throw current leaders under the bus. People who are still in the Marine Corps, you don't want to skyline them for any kind of a decision they made or didn't make. There's reputations involved. And there's also the information about, was there classified information that this person is putting into the out into the ether? Is this classified? So there's a review process that has to take place before you can go to your publisher and say, this is the manuscript. Thankfully, I was skeptical. I thought it was going to be like this black hole of, they're never going to get back to me. It's going to be months and months and months. But surprisingly, I was pleasantly surprised. I think I sent it out. It was the summer of 20. When was it? It was the summer of 2020. I think I sent the manuscript out, and it came back by September of 2020. Maybe even early. Maybe, yeah. Maybe like just 5 months later or less. It was already back in my hands, and they had signed off on it and good to
And
go.
it's kind of anticlimactic, right? Like you get a single sheet of paper that's like there's nothing in here
Yeah,
that's
nothing in here that's egregious or alarming to us, that, no classified information. And yeah, it's just a spot check they do to say, okay, what's being written about it? And is it, other things too, is this inflammatory? Is it going to be throwing, like, whether you disagree or agree with the missions in Afghanistan or Iraq or anything else, right? You can't be inflammatory in what you're saying while you're still in the service.
I know that book by Hackworth about face. He was the Colonel
Mm.
Hackworth, and there's a reason he's
Yeah.
colonel and not general. Who I think he's the one who told Walter Cronkite that the Vietnam War was unwinnable.
Oh,
Um,
really? Okay.
publishing his book was he ended up inviting, the attention of the FBI for the rest of his life, basically.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting how the process of running afoul of that structure ended up shaping his political views for the rest of his life.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, because people are putting things out there that are, you're putting out there to be scrutinized, and so you gotta be careful with what you're saying. Yeah.
um, Now, as far as putting things out there,
Mhm.
I know there's a question that came up on a previous podcast about kind of the book we wish someone would write. And I know you
Oh,
have
yeah,
like
yeah.
some pretty
Yeah.
interesting answers to this, but I don't
Yeah.
want to ask you about stuff you're working on that you might not want to share.
That's a good question. Yeah, I kind of want to give you like a not even a sneak peek because I'm only putting pen to paper on it. But yeah, I think let's see, how do I want to answer this question? I'll hold on that. I'll hold on if I can.
Yeah, all
Okay.
I'll
Yeah.
say is that I think there's probably some listeners who are super
Yeah.
disappointed that in the last 2 minutes I'm mentioning that you're also like kind of a classical scholar, and
Yeah.
you travel to like when you're not Marine Corpsing, you're
Mhm.
like in Italy seeing ancient Roman ruins and things like that.
Yeah, I love antiquities. I love Roman history and the Latin language. I'm a huge Latin language nerd. You know, and it's one thing I think I've continued to return to the Latin language as just a wonderful pastime. It's the one thing that has I think I've derived more pleasure from in my adult life by just doing little bits here and there every day, or at least a few times a week, whether it's a translation or whether it's reading about a Roman author or both, right? It's just things I derive pleasure from consistently. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah,
And
yeah.
what does your shirt say? There's some Latin right there.
It's Virgilius Maro. He is the Roman poet Publius Virgilius Maro. He's right behind me. There's obviously it's TR, and then on back here is the Roman poet Virgil, and that's I guess the closest hint I'll give to like a book I wish that were written, or a story that I wish were written. Yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah,
Um, Chris, I mean, thanks again so much for being here. I'm gonna drop a link to your book and your website and everything in the show notes. Um, the question I always close with: is there anything that there's like so much I feel like we could have gotten into today? Was there
yeah, yeah,
anything that
yeah.
I didn't ask you about that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, no, I mean, no, it's always good conversation with you, Charlie. I really appreciate the invite, and I'm glad we were able to connect. And I'm just glad to see you that you're back safe after circumnavigating Ireland. That's no small feat, and that's a huge accomplishment. And so proud of you for doing that. And it was great to see your progress, and that is definitely an accomplishment. And I'm sure your wife was like, "Okay, he better hurry back up or hurry back here because when's your baby due?"
July 9th.
Yeah, you didn't have much more.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't have much time. Like so.
No, no, talk about
Yeah,
like thin margins. It was
thin
yeah, it was
margins. Yeah,
good to get home. And hey, this being Memorial Day, I want to give a shout out. I mean, getting in touch with you and getting to know you as a friend and read your book, that all came about by way of my dad's book, which is like the gift that keeps on giving. And
yes,
it's
yes. I saw your dad's book, and it had father son, co-authorship, and that's I found you on LinkedIn, and that's where this began back in I think 2020. I think is when I first contacted you, and you were gracious enough to have a conversation, and then it led to other things, and I'm just it's led to a great friendship, and so I'm just happy I was able to reach out, and that you were you and your father both were just very accessible to a guy that didn't know how to even begin writing a book. Really grateful for your accessibility and just your generosity to help me work through that process.
yeah, no, the timing was so good. And
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it was really just this mutual appreciation kind of moment. And it goes to something, if I can just like evangelize for why people should write books. Because I think
Yeah,
and this has come up again and again on this podcast, that the most compelling reasons to write a book don't have anything to do with sales or
no,
status or
no,
whatever.
not
And
at
a
all.
lot of it is like you're going to end up making really cool connections Um, you have kind of this built-in reason to talk to people,
Right,
and
right, and like you showed me, even like for we like, shamelessly plug our own books. Like you just put it into your email signature on Gmail, so now it's always there. It's just something that's always there, and it's not to force someone's hand to purchase the book. It's just, hey, I'm an author. Maybe you'll buy it, maybe not, but it's a conversation starter, and it's part of who you are now, right? It's as much of your identity as anything else.
oh, yeah, absolutely, and you can even I mean, even, like, to the point of, I think there's at least 1 or 2 people where having some academic goal not work out
Yeah.
led me to be like, "Well, my friend Chris, like, wrote a book about that."
Yeah, yeah, and I probably should have said this earlier. I won't go much farther because I know we both have to go. But my book. My sister made a comment. She's like, "Your book is not a self help book. It's it's how I helped myself, but
Mhm.
it's not a self help book, right?" And that's what I think, because people's like, well, where does it belong in the in a bookstore? I'm like, that's a good question. I mean, it's a memoir, right? And if it resonates with those who have failed and failed anything, doesn't have to be the bar exam, but failed anything significant, like that's fair. But anyway, yeah, we can go on and on.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's a really no, it is so funny though when you have to start asking because answering those questions for yourself is gonna make your
Yeah.
book a better book
Right.
at the end of the
Exactly.
day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Chris, thanks again so much.
No, thank you,
Was
Charlie. Great to see you. Yeah, good. I mean, enjoy the rest and recovery from a well-earned rest and recovery. I hope you're still enjoying like comfort food and scones and Americanos and all those things.
Yeah, I'm gonna go stuff my face for like second lunch as soon as we get off this call.
Yeah.
So
Okay, sounds
thanks
good.
again, and I hope
Yeah.
everyone at home is like enjoying the day off, but taking a moment or two to remember what it's about.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, Chris, thank you for being part of that tradition.
Thank you, and give my best to your dad.
Will do. If you have an epic story, I'd love to hear it. You can find me at dailypros.com or on LinkedIn. My links and Chris's are in the show notes. Thanks for listening.